So excited to have you here, Dianne Bennett, Full Hearts Leadership Consulting, my very first podcast guest. Thank you again for being here. I'm just going to do a quick introduction of both the podcast, and then I'll lead with you, Dianne, and we'll get started on those deep, meaningful questions I sent you in advance. All
Okay.
right. So welcome to the Entrepreneurial Edge, stories of midlife women on the leading edge of entrepreneurship. This podcast is for midlife female entrepreneurs who are at the leading edge of business. Each woman we feature as a guest has made the courageous leap from corporate life to taking the controls and starting her own business. And I will also sprinkle in some experts and partnerships who will bring extra value with their specialty in entrepreneurial systems. Our guests include successful women entrepreneurs who share their journey of creating a business that not only thrives, but also allows them to live a life of freedom, purpose, and abundance. Each episode features insights on overcoming marketing challenges, setting effective business strategies, aligning core values with business goals, and building a business you simply love. So, today on our episode, I am welcoming with a very open heart my dear friend and peer, Dianne Bennett, who is the founder of Full Hearts Leadership and Consulting. As an experienced leader and passionate advocate for personal growth and transformation, she works with organizations to implement the support and solutions leaders need to unlock the power of their people, deliver results they might not have imagined possible, and create a culture where talent and customers can feel they belong. She is on a mission to create a world full of full hearts, inspired by the potential we all hold to shape human experience. Welcome, Dianne.
Thank you so much. You have no idea how much this means to me to be here on this journey with you and to see this podcast kick off. You're going to do such amazing things for so
Aw.
many women, and I'm just glad to be part of your journey.
Well, thank you again for taking the time to be
Of
here.
course.
So, every podcast episode, I'm going to open with this one question to get us started. So, tell me about the day you decided to take the leap into becoming an entrepreneur, Dianne.
Yes. Great question. Um, when I think back on that day, I can tell you that I was tired. I was
Mm,
tired of seeing people, I think, wanting more for themselves, seeing so much potential in people in the way that we were showing up in our world and in life
mm,
and with each other.
mm,
And more importantly, I think I was tired of feeling limited by the vision of others, feeling like I wasn't living to my greatest potential. Um,
mm,
and more than anything, being scared of feeling
mm,
this way a year later, or even more scarier, 3 years later. And so it was just that was the push I think that I needed to say something's got to change. And it was only going to change if I took a leap. So
That is so good, right? Like that taking that agency to make a decision that is, I think, very courageous and brave. I don't think entrepreneurship is for everybody. I think it's definitely not an easy path, and it's filled with a lot of uncertainty. So I always want to share and appreciate what you've done to take that step into entrepreneurship on that day.
thank
So thank you for sharing that.
you. Of
So my
course.
follow-up question is, describe the moment when your perfect client achieves a thing you helped them to do, and describe that day where you helped them become the hero of their life or their business. What was that like? And can you kind of walk us through the process?
Sure. So I will be very honest and say that
Mhm.
there would probably be a ton of crying on that day and in that moment. Just knowing myself, I'm gonna full disclosure, I am a
Yeah.
total crier. Um, only because there's nothing more fulfilling for me than to see someone's journey, to see someone start from a place of feeling that something is not possible or
Mm,
questioning, right, what they're capable
mhm,
of, and then reaching a space where they now believe.
mm,
Um, they believe in their power to create and do the things that they need to do.
mhm,
And that for me has always been what's drawn me, I think, to coaching and to leading. And I think, unfortunately, in the corporate space or in a lot of many businesses, not just big corporations, things are always so busy that we don't have time, I think, to really focus and hone in on the potential that our people have. And
Mhm.
I don't know, I feel like leaders are challenged with so many things. And for me,
Mhm.
I know that when you invest and you focus on the right things, sometimes it unlocks doors in ways that you don't always think possible. And for me, I just, in my heart, something in my heart, I think has always told me that um, the magic is in our people, right?
Ooh, tell
And
me
that's
more
where we
about
can
that.
start.
Yeah, tell me more about that. When do you have something in particular, like kind of a specific example about your experience with people that makes it feel like that's so magic to you? Okay, recording. Awesome. Okay, back after some technical difficulties. We're just gonna roll with it.
I was just
It's
gonna
all
say
good.
leadership 101, you just have to roll with things.
That's right. It's all
Right?
good. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
where we left off was I wanted to hear more about. You said something that was really inspiring to me and kind of stuck out, and I wanted to go deeper into it. It was just to tell me more about the magic of people that you mentioned, and if there's anything in particular, like if you have a specific maybe example that you've encountered. Of course, you can maintain anonymity and not mention
Sure.
names, but tell me more about why you hone in on that, because I think that's really unique about your approach and the
Yeah.
work that you do is that you come at it from this perspective that oftentimes like we get lost in our own stuff. Like for me with marketing or photography, like I just know what I know and I forget like when someone tells me back, like, wow, that was really helpful. I had no idea.
Mhm.
I didn't know about X or Y, or that's really strategic. For me, it's just in my head all the time. So for you, I think that's part of the value that you bring from your
Yeah.
point of view and perspective. So tell me more about the magic of people.
Sure. Um, so I think the first thing to understand, I think when I think about the business world, um, we tend to be very focused on processes. We tend to be very focused on scripts and process maps and reports and all that good stuff, data.
Yeah.
And that's all good, right? Like
Yeah.
that's all a very necessary part of business. But I
Hmm.
think the piece that we sometimes forget is that behind every customer interaction, behind every employee experience, every leadership experience, there's always a person at the other end
That's
of
right.
things.
Hmm.
And we have to recognize that people are more than processes, right? When I think of processes and reports and things, I'm thinking of our heads, right? In our minds. Um, and a very important or very big aspect, I think, of our humanity is our hearts. And that makes such a big difference in how we show up as people. But for whatever reason, we compartmentalize our hearts in the way we show up in the business world. And so I think maybe the best way to elaborate or demonstrate this is I'll share a very personal experience for me, at least, where I think it became very evident to me the unique power that we have as people.
Mm.
And so this goes back many years, right? When I was young, right? I think in my early 20s in the retail world. And I was working in what was called Filene's at the time. And I was prepping our area for we had a big senior leader coming to visit. And so I was working our jean wall and making sure all the racks were great. And I had noticed a middle-aged gentleman walk into the junior section, right, for girls. And um, he looked a little lost and wanted to make sure I greeted him and just asked him if he was okay, if he needed help with anything. And he said no, right? He was, and I think from an expectation perspective, the only requirement of me in my role at that time, right, was to greet him, right? and answer any questions he had. And he didn't have any questions, right? And so I think my initial reaction, right, would be to kind of just go back to folding and, and doing what I was doing to prep. And something in me made me kind of follow and just kind of prep and clean as he was moving through, the department. And we opened up conversation. We had some small talk. And what I came to find out in that through that conversation was that he had recently lost his wife and he had a teenage daughter who had just
Mm,
accomplished something very special in her life. And there was some sort of a special dinner or ceremony. And he was looking for an outfit for her, something special for her.
mm,
And it was in that moment, I think, that I realized that beyond answering questions and greeting him, I had a very unique opportunity, right? This was going to be a very special moment between a father and a daughter
mm,
that they would remember for the rest of their lives. And here I was, so lucky and so blessed to have an opportunity to influence that, to shape
mm,
how that experience would look like. And so him and I spent some time walking through the store, him explaining to me, more about his daughter and looking for something for her. And that
mm.
always stood with me, right? No matter where I went. I think when I went into working at a jewelry store, right, I would have, couples coming in to celebrate their 50th anniversary, or the young boyfriend who's smitten and is nervous about making his proposal to the love of his life. And here I
Aw,
am, like, I could talk about, jewelry, I could talk about payment plans, um, but more importantly, I could shape how they felt about this experience, because you're always going to remember those things, you know?
that's right. Yep.
Um, and then even as leaders, right? And so I remember my first day moving into my corporate role and how nervous I was, right? Did I make the right
Mm,
decision? Um, is this the right thing for my family? Can I do this? All those feelings that come up is a very real part of our human experience.
mhm.
And as leaders, we have this opportunity to shape how people feel about that and how they recall those moments in their life. And so I don't know, there's just something
Mm.
very special about that, I think, that a
Yeah.
script and process can't deliver. So
Yeah, I would absolutely agree wholeheartedly with that. And I think, at the end of the day, we tend to kind of forget about some of the, relationships that we need to build with people in all the work that we do. And you gave such great examples of that, from, retail experiences that you've had to the corporate experience to now as an entrepreneur. And one of the things I wanted to direct our conversation towards is these things that you're doing, which are so fabulous. 2 times a week, you host these huddles, and I think they're 10 minutes, right?
yeah, they're
10
not
minute
long.
huddles.
Yeah, like
Okay.
15 minutes, just quick hit.
Yeah.
15 minutes.
So based on like that, the beauty in what you said, the magic of people and how you coach and help leaders, tell me more about what inspired those huddles and what your goal is and who should be joining you in those.
Absolutely. So I think it actually stemmed from my own entrepreneurial journey, right? So as a solopreneur,
Mhm.
it can be quiet, right? When you're just by yourself working all day, tackling tasks, trying to be creative. And I recognized that there was something shifts in my energy when I'm around people, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
for so many other people, that's the same thing. And so in my mind, I'm sure that there were other solopreneurs or the remote workers who were maybe feeling right the same need or
Yeah.
desire for community, or even people. I think a lot of people may work in spaces with other people, but may not necessarily have a safe or a strong connection, and so don't
Yeah.
feel right that sense of community. And so very simply, I just wanted to create a space where we could come together um, in community and learn to build, I think, off of one another's energy, learn to share perspective and experiences in a way that could propel us through our weeks,
Yeah.
right? Or even at the end of the week, right? To celebrate. Because there's nothing more rewarding than after kicking your butt all week long to be able to step back and say, yes, I did it. And share just the energy and joy that comes with that, right, with other people. It's
That's
contagious.
right.
Energy is very contagious, I think. So,
Yeah, good and bad actually. So hence the like
mhm.
you have this way of really creating a positive space for people. I loved your post that you had. What is it? I think it was a week or two ago. And it was literally like this breathing exercise that you did and walked people through it. And it was like a heart centered
Yeah.
way of just like reconnecting and grounding. I call it like kind of a grounding
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
a good way, not like teenager grounding, but like awareness and centering and like with all of the noise and the million things coming at us as entrepreneurs, like we need to take a moment sometimes to just ground ourselves, right? It's kind of like put your oxygen mask on first. And I have to admit, when I was younger and I used to travel a lot with family. I have family abroad, and I would get on the plane and they would do like, the introduction, and the flight attendants would be, guiding you through emergency procedures. And they would always say, put your oxygen mask on first. And when I was little, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. You have to save the person next to you. And the older I got, and of course, after I had children, you're like, okay,
I get it.
now I get it. Like, it's so important to put our oxygen mask on first. And that post just like made me think about that. Like, right, okay,
Yeah.
I needed a reminder to just like get back to center,
Yeah.
take some breaths, like, and you have the most soothing voice. I told somebody else I was on a call with about you earlier today, and I said, she reminds me of, and I think you probably know who this person is, but the woman I was talking to was too young. She didn't know. But do you remember Delilah on the
Yeah.
radio?
Delilah.
Yes. Like, she reminds me of that, because not to put people to sleep, but like to just she had such a calm voice, and she was dealing with people in the kind of a similar capacity. They were, going through heartache, or they wanted to celebrate some like amazing accomplishment or recognize somebody. And again, that's the magic of people concept I think that you shared with me today. You're very much in that same line, but like
Well,
you're
thank
the
you.
business version of Delilah.
I'll take that. That's a high compliment.
Yeah, she was amazing. I mean, man,
I
she was like all like she was nationwide in her show. I mean, people tuned in
was
every night
amazing.
on like old
I
school
still tune
radio.
in.
Yeah,
Still tune
right?
in from time to time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to share, like, those are those little special parts of working with you, Diane, like whether it's peer to peer partnership or as a client, like you do have this very special point of view. And I feel like it is uncommon and uncommonly good. Like for
Oh,
people
thank
that are the right fit for to work with you, I think that you will only we call it pull and push marketing. So we don't
you.
believe really in push marketing. We believe in pull marketing. It's like the law of attraction. It's very magnetic. So you show up in your authentic, meaningful way and do the things that you do, and it automatically will attract those right perfect person. I
Yeah.
call what's known in the marketing world as like your ideal customer avatar, or your ideal customer, your target. That feels very dis disengaged. So I have called that same kind of thing in the marketing world, my equivalency is your perfect person, because you're always talking to a human in marketing, no matter what we're doing. And I
Absolutely.
think for you, it helps kind of define what you're attracting. Do you want to maybe tell me more, because I feel like it's helpful for shedding light on your business? Who is your perfect person, or give me some idea of who you're looking to help and work with through your services?
Yeah. So I think for me, it's the intentional leader.
Okay.
It's the leader who knows, right, that they have the capacity
Mm,
to influence and create impact, and has a strong desire and sense of purpose behind that, but
mm,
maybe they just don't know how, right, or haven't been given the tools yet, right, to navigate that experience or want to be better at it, right? Because to be quite honest, we learn a lot of the what in the leadership
mhm,
space, right? What do I need to say? What do I need to do? We don't always focus so much on the how and
mhm.
the how makes a big difference in whether or not something's effective. I can do two of the exact same steps, but in very different ways and
Yep.
deliver very different outcomes. And so that's my goal. I think, and when I think about leaders, um, leaders touch so many lives, right? And that's for me,
Yeah.
that's the fastest way to transform, workplace teams, to transform households, even, right? I mean,
Mhm.
as a mother, I know that the way I feel at work influences the way that I would come home at the end of the
Mm.
day and show up for my family.
Mhm.
And we have a choice, right? We can leave ourselves, I think we can deplete ourselves, right, as we go through our days,
Mhm.
or we can go through our days in a way that allows us to build energy around us and build synergy, and in a way that's very contagious and very supportive and uplifting, right, for everyone in our space. So,
Yeah, absolutely, and that goes back to that, all emotions can be contagious. My husband, who's, getting his degree in psychology and has been in the behavior world for a long time, um, mostly with dogs, but inevitably when you work with dogs, you're actually working with their people to help them fix the dog. So you have to be very mindful of like behavior and stuff. And, you know, he always talks to us, meaning myself and my daughters, about the emotional contagion. And it's a real thing. It's scientifically
mhm,
proven. Like your emotional space does affect the people around you, and your state of being, your state of
mhm,
mind will also do that. Not just outwardly but inwardly. Like if we're not talking to ourselves in a
mhm,
meaningful way, in a caring way, not with kid gloves all the time, but like speaking truth inward, that's going to
yeah,
affect our state outward, right? So I really can appreciate your methodology and your process. And I think at the end of the day, if you had one of your clients come back to you and say, Dianne, you really moved me from like, I guess would you call it maybe not empty hearted leadership, but just like unintentional leadership to intentional leadership? What does that look like? Like, how do they know they've accomplished that thing with you? What do they say to you when they're
um,
done?
I think it's a feeling, right? I think anything, right, that requires, that's the heart, right? It's a
Mhm.
feeling. Your interactions, I think, fuel you versus depleting you.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and you're no longer in, I think, survival mode, right? I think too
Mhm.
many of us are, um, we're just running in our days. We're surviving our days. And
Mhm.
rather than surviving, it's a feeling of really, of thriving, I think, in purpose, right?
Mm.
Thriving in
Mhm.
purpose. And when you show up, and you're able to influence people in that way and you see things, it just brings a different meaning to everything that you do. Um,
Mhm.
and you feel that, right? Like that, it
Yeah,
feeds your soul, it fuels you, it pours into you versus, I think, taking away from you. And I think one thing that I would add is it's very tempting, I think, as leaders, as parents, right? Because leadership can wear lots of different hats.
that's right.
Um, but I think it's very tempting to always be thinking about how do I create change around me, right? And
Mm.
looking outward all the time. And I think one of the most defining lessons for me in my own journey was recognizing, and you, I think, touched upon this even earlier, was recognizing the power that comes from turning inward first,
Right.
right? So
Mhm.
creating the change that you need from within first, right? That's
Mhm.
that grounding and that centering. Um, it just makes a big difference in your ability to reach. I think with everyone else in survival mode and in kind of always going, if you're able to be centered and grounded, um, your ability to influence and create the right energy and the right space for people to find their way in their own journey just becomes that much more helpful, valuable. So,
Yeah, that's so amazing. So it sounds to me like when someone's done the work that they can do with you, they can
yeah,
show up like wholeheartedly and intentionally, and that is a trickle down effect, not only on like their teams, but also maybe culture wide within their organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Um,
Yeah.
it's what it starts, right? It starts with one person who's grounded, and you create an environment around you, and it starts with, as a leader, it starts maybe with your specific unit, your specific team, and as you influence those people and they become more grounded and more intentional in how they show up and interact, right? You start to see, I mean, I've seen it firsthand. You start to see other teams that they interact with, right, become the same way, and it fuels very quickly. And it seems very simple, and it seems probably flies under the radar, but I can just tell you from experience, it's transformational
Mm,
in so many ways, right? Because interaction is a part of everything we do. Right? Everything we do
yeah.
requires interaction, and so um, it's important.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, how do people connect with you if they feel like what you've said resonates with them and they want to reach out?
Absolutely. First of all, I would love to talk with people. That's my favorite thing to do, is to talk with people and learn about their journey and their goals. People can find me on any of the platforms. So LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn. Um, Dianne Bennett, Dianne, two N's, and
Mhm.
Dianne, two N's, two T's, and Bennett. Full Hearts Leadership and Consulting on Facebook, and Full Hearts Leadership Consulting on Instagram. So any of the three platforms. If anyone wants to reach out to me directly, they can also email me at Dianne, Dianne, dot Bennett, Bennett, underscore full hearts at outlook.com. So
Awesome. Well, I so appreciate you. Just to give a little bit of a background on Diane and I, which I wanted to save for the end, is that Diane and I met through a program called Thrive Her, that was created and built and still going by a woman named Trisha Dempsey, and we were one of her early cohorts. Like, what is it? 2 years ago now?
I
Is
know it's
that
great. It's hard to
right?
believe that much time has gone
My
by almost.
gosh.
I know.
Yeah. And
But,
like we just became fast friends. I think most likely, if my memory recalls, Diane reached out to me and connected with me. She's like that go getter, go giver kind of spirit, as you
you
guys have
just
now.
you just had that special energy about you. I needed some of that in my life. And then I think it was our first conversation, right? We could talk forever and just
Yeah.
seem to understand where we're coming from. And that is just such a gift in our life when we can find people like that.
Yeah.
I'm not
You've been a
surprised.
wonderful like guardian on my journey the last 2 years. Like, so Diane's been I'm just gonna like speak to your amazing skills. And not that I have been your client, but I feel like it's so hard for you to not do what you do. But you're such a guardian on complicated journeys with check-ins and like reading people as far as like how are you really doing? Like we can really talk about this thing if you need to discuss a hard thing, whether it was like my entrepreneurial journey or my personal journey. You and I have many parallels in
Mhm.
our lives and our experiences as a parent and as spouses in the past and also in business. So there's this parallel thing, and that's made it seem less hard. And like you've made me feel seen and heard and acknowledged and validated across the board on so many things, which has also inspired me to propel forward and keep going. Because sometimes it's really hard. And I think, at the end of the day, entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, and you can't do it alone. Like, you have to have some people. So, my vision for working with anyone like Diane is a peer or a partner is to welcome those types of people into the mix that just are capable, want to show up, be seen, be heard, like whether it's through this podcast or in our personal group, which I think I'm going to start having applications for. I handpick all these women in our group that we meet once a month, um, to contribute, but also support one another and know that like, the stuff that we encounter as entrepreneurs is not unique. It feels like it is, but it's not. And when you have somebody say to you, like Diane's really good at this, like, you're not alone. Like, I hear you, and I'm going to share that I also have the same experience. Like, that makes everything just a little bit easier to continue that, to propel yourself forward. So, Diane's excellent at this, and she's excellent at what she does. So,
Thank you.
I really want to encourage people to just go find you. Like, I think on LinkedIn, you show up really well.
Thank
I
you.
think for our audience, that's the best place for them to find you, but you can, like, Diane said, find her at all the other platforms. And also want to encourage people to show up for her huddles. Like, it's a
Yeah.
very wide open space right now. Um, Diane, real quick too, because I didn't ask this, where can people get
Good.
to ask about your huddles? Where do they go if they are
Absolutely. Great
interested in that?
question. Both on LinkedIn and on Facebook, I've created event links for the huddles. They're
Okay.
every Monday morning at 10:30 for 20 minutes, and every
Mhm.
Friday afternoon at the close of the week at 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time for 20 minutes. So they can find me either way. And I just I want to echo something for you, Don, because
Mhm.
um, we don't see ourselves, I think, through the same lens that other people see us.
Yeah. Yeah, no
And
doubt.
you, my friend, you give so much credit to other people, but you are freaking amazing.
Oh,
You are such a beautiful person. I mean, and I think that's why I'm drawn to you is this spirit you have about empowering people, whether
yeah.
it's through this podcast, whether it's empowering you new entrepreneurs, right?
Mhm.
Or even the women that you work with through your portrait couture
Mm.
studio. It's all
Mhm.
about, I think, same thing, helping people feel seen and strong
Mm.
in their power and in
Mhm.
their story, right? Because I think that's
Right.
something that you and I both share. I think
Yeah.
it's very easy when we go through difficult things to feel overwhelmed and isolated by our
Yep.
experiences. But
Mhm.
when we find the courage to recognize that those difficult experiences uniquely position us with
Mhm.
gifts
Mhm.
to reach other people in similar
Yeah.
spaces and help them to feel seen and not isolated.
Yeah.
And so I love you because you are bold and you are brave. It doesn't mean that it's easy for us to be bold and brave,
No, definitely
um,
not.
but we lean in because we know what it feels like to feel isolated and to feel um,
Yeah.
unsure. And so I think when we're able to give anyone that sense of hope and evidence of what's possible at the other end,
Mhm.
um, it's a pretty special feeling. It gives purpose, I think, even to the things that we've been through, right? And so,
It absolutely does, and thank you for saying that. Like,
absolutely.
I was when I was talking with some other guests, that are gonna be on in the upcoming episodes, it was interesting to even hear myself talk to them about, there's this kinda, like, surface level reason for this podcast, which is, like, we are really in an uncharted territory with regard
Mhm.
to the podcast world, like, midlife female entrepreneurs, not a lot out there, and
Right.
all of the dimensions that come with that. Having prior corporate experience and now moving into this new arena, uncharted arena for many of us. We often, most of us have experienced some kind of, not necessarily intentional, but silencing, right? Like,
Hmm.
regardless of what it is like to be a woman in a corporate world, in a workplace. Not that all of them were bad experiences, but we have that layer, right? Where I want to make
Hmm.
sure, as in part of my marketing, expertise is like this. The whole goal of this podcast is to shed light on my guests and their businesses, and like help them if they have a marketing challenge we can talk about, or just as a result of the podcast, give them material that they can push out there
Yeah.
afterwards. But when you get below that to the philosophical driving force behind this podcast, it is because of those experiences that I've had personally, and many of the people who are going to be on this podcast have had similar stories of feeling silenced and controlled and put down and unvalidated.
Mm.
And I don't think we can do the work that we need to do until we're seen and heard, both personally and professionally. So while this podcast is really more, it is focused on the professional, there you
Yeah.
will hear hints of the personal side that have positioned us, people like myself and Dianne and many other women who are going to be on this podcast, to also power and push with empathy. So there is such an unlock that happens when you do that. And the goal of
Mm-hmm.
this podcast is to enable that unlock, right? Like to really help us put light into places that aren't comfortable sometimes, but to know that you're not alone and like we can do this. And there are lots of people within our network that are capable with their resources and their expertise in the business world that are going to help you keep going. Because my
Yeah.
goal is to see every woman win in business.
I love
Absolutely
it.
the goal. Yeah.
I love it. And you have my full support, 1000%. I
And
will be
you
watching
mind.
every episode, as should everybody else. So,
Oh, thank you, Miss Diane. Well,
you're
I know
welcome.
you have a daughter to pick up at school, so we're gonna
I
wrap up
know. Mom
and get
life,
you
mom
into,
life,
yeah,
right?
switch over to mom mode. And
Mhm.
thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you.
And I will look forward to presenting you with a full length version of this. We'll have I will probably do some editing. I just want to
Sure.
say to the audience, like we had a couple of tech glitches and we had, we're work from home. This is the life.
Yeah,
So there's dogs barking and stuff. And that's just us. So if that's not for you, that's
exactly.
okay. But
Yeah.
when you show up on this podcast, we have those things happen. And I'm a dog person. Diane's a dog person. So dog barking is
It's just
oftentimes going
real.
to accompany. It's
It's
real
all
life,
real.
right? Just like
Exactly.
entrepreneurship. Some days it's just
Well,
not going to go like completely noiseless. So here we are. Take us or leave
absolutely.
us, right?
Yes.